When did you start working on Deep in the Heart of Nowhere?
Around about July, I got to the point where I could ease off a bit on what I've been doing over the last 2 years. The main problem for me was whether my mind had gone completely numb because of what I've been doing for the last 2 years. Not only with regard to whether it just wanted to do nothing, or whether because the organisational side of your brain, the linear side of your brain, the part that makes you concentrate, was the part that was mainly used over the last 2 years, and the abstract side of your brain, which writes songs, was not allowed to function. And so there I was in splendid isolation, not knowing if I could write a song. That was one problem. Secondly, what would happen if all I wanted to write was something like yummy, 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 I've got love in my tummy? The record company said, come on, yeah, you must be joking after 2 years like that. There must be something else. I said, I don't know. I really don't know. And they got very worried, and they went out and got lots of people to write me songs just in case I didn't come up with anything. Then one night I was in Paris with Dave Stewart from the Eurythmics, who was helping me out, trying to pull me out of my thing and get me back into music. And we had a little too much to drink, and it was about 5 in the morning, and he wanted to go to bed. And all these ideas that I must have stored up came bursting out on the guitar, and like with lyrics and everything. And I kept, what do you think of this one? He said, oh, great, can I go to bed, you know? And I think I played about 30 different things to him that night. And that was it. Like, I mean, suddenly there was this sort of enormous floodgate opening. And part of the reason why it had taken the 2 years was, one was the time, and secondly I also had to find a new contract.
It must have been a relief to have some songs pouring out of you.
It certainly was. I mean, I was scared. I was going to say a word, you know. I mean, it was frightening. It was just this empty feeling. I felt very tired and exhausted, and I just thought that I'm not hearing anything in my head at all. And when I'd pick up a guitar, it would be meaningless, you know. I'd, sort of fiddle around with the strings and put it down again, and then go off on a tangent with regard to something else I was doing. So when it all came pouring out, not only was it a relief, but more to the point, it sort of restored my confidence, because here was Dave Stewart, a man who produces great records, who writes great hits, saying, that's great. And he was actually mixing the Eurythmics album at the time, and he was mixing Mick Jagger's single. So Mick heard some of the things, and he said, that's great. So here were all these people, and I thought, oh, is it? And also, of course, the thing was I was very nervous, because I'd never played without my band before. And these were the guys who were having hits. I hadn't had a hit for, a few years. And I was a bit nervous about recording then, because if I went into a studio, I'm not going to tell someone who's on every record in the planet, actually I don't like what you're playing, I want you to play this, But what happened was Dave said, look, he said, I can't produce the album, but come to LA where we're rehearsing for the Eurythmics tour, and we'll do some demos together in my place, and we'll work out a few things. So I went there, and it was the night of the Amnesty International concerts. And like in LA, there actually isn't that much to do there for such a massive city, and certainly if you're not a native. And so all the bands come to the studios to see what's happening. And as every band was in town for the Amnesty gigs, they all piled down to A&M. And I know the U2 crowd very well, both being paddies, you see. And so they were all there, and they were bashing away on one of the songs, which in fact I didn't use in the end, because I didn't like it, nothing to do with their playing, but I just didn't like it particularly. And there was loads of other people, so we went down to the Amnesty thing, Dave and myself, as the Brothers of Doom.
That explains that. I didn't understand where you were thinking, well, the co-writing song, you and Doom.
Yeah, right.
I thought it was almost tongue-in-cheek.
No, I'm Dick Doom, and I wanted him to be Roger Doom, but he didn't want to be, he wanted to be Raymond Doom, because apparently he's always wanted to be called Raymond. And so we were dressed in these black sort of coats that made us look like Undertakers, so I said it's the Brothers of Doom. So we played 2 Bob Marley songs, Get Up, Stand Up and Redemption song, him playing acoustic, me singing. and we were waiting to go on, and Peter Gabriel was on, and Peter Gabriel was playing Biko, and you know that drum beat, doof, ksh, doof, ksh, and that's all I could hear because I was backstage. And I said to Dave, I said, "That's a great beat." I said, well, "I want to write a song with that in it." And I leant across to him and I said, "I hear a heartbeat, it's ringing out across the universe." "Oh, that's great." He said, "Let's do that one tomorrow." So. We did it the next day, and it took 3 hours, and I was delighted because it was the absolutely perfect song for me to write at that point, because it's soft and it pulls you in rather than strikes out at you, and it is very much a sort of little prayer before you go to bed at night.
I'd almost viewed it as almost a Christmas song. The singers, I think it's Allison and Annie and Marie.
Right.
They sound like angels. It's so beautiful.
I mean, look at them and listen to their voices. They're like angels come down to earth when you put them together. I mean, they're extraordinary, you know. And then Omar Hakim was there.
Wow.
And Jimmy Iovine was there doing Allison's record, so Jimmy was in there. And Omar said, "Well, what do you want me to play?" Because you only had a drum machine. And I said, "Well, can you play Let's Dance?" Because, you know, he plays the Let's Dance thing. So he said, "Yeah, sure." So that's what he's playing. He's just playing Let's Dance on it, yeah. And then T.M. Stevens was on the bass. He was just doing the Pretenders album, so he was out there because of Jimmy as well. And he played on it. And then Pat Seymour for the Eurythmics on piano. So there ain't no slouches on that track, I got to tell you.
I want to get back to that in a little bit, but what I wanted to ask you is, does it almost feel like you're embarking on a third lifetime? I mean, you're 33 now, right? It just occurred to me that, I mean, you had the Boomtown Rats, then you went through that enormous, worldwide event, and now coming back to music again.
Except that it really feels to me as exciting as 1978 felt to me, which was the year when the Boomtown Rats were on that upward curve of the graph. We start in the summer '75 in Ireland, and nothing could prevent us from being huge in that year of '78 in Britain. And I remember at the end of the year thinking, this has been the best year of my life ever. And I don't like studios or the technique of songs. Once it's over on the guitar, that's really it for me, The rest of me is really a chore. And but this time I ran to the studio every day because it was such fun. I couldn't wait to get up and get going. You must understand that I was given a lot of options this year as to what I wanted to do. Like, they all wanted me to stand for Parliament in England and all stuff like that and things. And none of it interested me. The only thing that interested me was playing music again. And the reason for that was because despite everything else that's happened, it never gave me a sense of achievement or a sense of satisfaction. The only thing that does that is when I write a good song. And I really needed it for the good of my soul at that time. And I realised that when Daryl Hall called me up in England and said, would I come down and do some backing vocals on his album? This was in April. And I went down, I'm useless at backing vocals, And if there's somebody else doing a harmony, I start singing their harmony, Or if they're doing the lead vocal, I start doing the lead vocal, But if you leave me alone, I can do them. But I went in there and I had come from some very heavy meeting, and suddenly people were talking about, EQs and the sound of this, or what key do you sing in, and it was so instinctive to me. It was like slipping into a warm bath. And then I had to leave and go to another meeting, and I had to wrench myself away. And so when I got going on my own thing, with all this stuff that had come out, that it was the most fun I've ever had making a record, and as a result, I think it's probably the most complete LP I've ever made. And those of you who don't know the Rat stuff wouldn't know that we made 6 albums, but this, without a doubt, is certainly the most complete record. I read a German review last week which said it was a very centered record, and that's exactly what it is.
Let's start going through the songs, okay? I'd like to try and go song by song.
We did. I think just the world calling.
Yeah. Let me see if I had another thing about that, though. I told you it reminded me of a Christmas song, but I was trying to get a perspective. Who's the operator?
I have no idea. Don't ask me to tell you what these songs are about. I mean, a review said it was a very cynical song. It's not at all. I don't know. The operator is something that's very reassuring.
Exactly.
That says it's okay. Grim as things are, there is enough dignity within you that that's the saving grace. And they quoted the line, "For my cynicism, I think there's so much beauty. I wish that I believed enough to pray." Well, I don't, and I wish I did often. So maybe this song is making up for that. But the operator is nothing extraterrestrial or transcendental or godlike.
Yeah. I read somewhere that you were concerned that, and you alluded to it before, that everybody would take a look at this record and then try and interpret and force meanings of Ethiopia onto it and all of that. And I think that you look at a title like This Is the World Calling. I don't know, I found myself thinking, gee, well...
Yeah, but if I'd written Yummy, 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 I've got love in my tummy, you'd have said it was a song about starvation.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing I can do that isn't going to be interpreted in that way, albeit wrongly. If I was ZZ Top and I'd made This Is the World Calling, would you have said it was a song about Ethiopia?
No. All right. In the pouring rain, I kind of viewed that as one of the ways to get through what might oppress your spirit. Like I looked at the rain as something that might be oppressing, or something that might be...
And The Pouring Rain was one of the first ones I wrote for this album. And it's, I think, in the end, probably one of my favourite songs off it. It's actually about something, so it's nothing to do with the sort of metaphor of the rain. I mean, to me, it was tied up with the whole Chernobyl thing. So everybody's going to catch their death in the pouring rain. Everybody better hold their breath, everybody going to walk and everybody hide away, And then, that's part of it, but only part of it. There's lots of other things. I wasn't specifically writing about that. That's what I thought of. But there were a lot more other things when I go into the song later on, I think that the problem that happened when I was writing this is that I knew everyone would look at this record for integrity and gravitas. And I almost hoped in a way that I could write a sort of Archie's type record or whatever they were called, And but I'm chronically disinclined to write like that, for those of you who know the old Rat stuff, So In the Pouring Rain is about something, yes, but it's also about other things that I can't put my finger on, but they feel in the pit of my stomach as if they're far deeper than any reason I might give you for writing it.
Well, one of the things that occurred to me about In the Pouring Rain as well was there's a reference to I might need you there. Somebody, I might grow tired, I stumble,
yeah, right.
I trip and fall in the pouring rain, and sometimes you have to pick me up.
Yeah.
From reading what I've read so far of your autobiography, you're fiercely independent. I mean, you're just always, I can get through myself. I don't need you or whatever. And then I see this line enter in here, and there seems to be just a small concession to, we need other people at times too.
That's the weak part of me coming out.
It's not weak. I think it's in everybody.
Well, that's very true. That's why I'm stumbling over the answer. Being independent was not for me a philosophy, it was a state of being. I learned to be very early on for millions of different factors. I mean, namely that my mother died when I was a small child and my father was travelling away all the time. So you grew up on your own, which is a great thing. I'm not crying the blues, because you learn to be self-dependent. And so you automatically have a horror of becoming dependent on anything, and in fact you can't really explain it. I mean, I actually remember the first time a girl cooked me a meal, and it had never happened to me before, because I went home, cooked my own meals and stuff, and like I was pathetically grateful, and subsequently, there are people whom I love, like my wife and my kid and stuff like that. So maybe it's them I'm singing to. Certainly, I could not continue enjoying my life without them. They are now part of what I consider my independence. But being that way, I'm also dependent on them being around. Though if they weren't, I would continue living, but just so if you have a house, you're dependent on it for giving you shelter. But if it wasn't there, you'd sleep under a bush.
I want to move on to the next song, August Was a Heavy Month. We were talking about Clapton.
Yeah.
Here is a guy that all of us kind of look at as one of the greatest guitar players in the world. And he was there in the studio working with you.
Yeah.
Could you kind of recount your feelings and thoughts?
Well, what happened was that he was at my stag party before I got married, and he just finished reading my book too, and he kept going on about it. And I said, "Look, hold the book. Do you want to play on my record?" And he said, "Yeah." So he came around the next day. I put on a track that I thought that he'd be great for, and I didn't have a title for it, and I sang in his ear as the track played. And he brought along this small little Fender twin reverb amp, put in the guitar, Fender's Stratocaster. Said, "Give me a bit of 25, will you?" To the engineer, which I didn't know what the hell he was talking about. The engineer gave him sort of, he had a digital readout thing. It was a Lexicon echo chamber. And that was all he had in his guitar. And this guy started playing on my song this incredible guitar playing. And I'm not really saying it because it's my record, because it wouldn't have ended up in the record if I didn't think it was great. But I've said it to him subsequently that I think he's played better on my record, which is very lucky for me, than any time since Derek and the Dominoes, if not the Blues Breakers, because the touch is so sure and so fine and so intuitive and instinctive that it really is a great player of any class of music at work. And I think that, I talked about Pablo Casals or Yo-Yo Ma, great classical players. This guy is the same instinctive player. And I asked him, I said, what would have happened if they hadn't have invented guitar? What would he have done? Because you see him and he closes his eyes and he doesn't breathe. He sucks it in, so he's exhausted when he stops playing. And whatever is going on in his mind is relayed through the fingers, and this bit of wood with 6 wires on it translates that into sound. And it's a bizarre thing to watch. It really is a very funny thing, and it only happens once in a blue moon. I mean, Rupert Hine, who was producing, just said, "I can't believe I'm paid to sit here and listen to this." And this playing was one take. And of course, when you hear it, you hear Mark Knopfler, you hear everyone who's come since, But I wonder, is it as emotional as Clapton playing? And I didn't have lyrics or anything. I had a vague idea of what I wanted to say. I had the line, "I'll take another photograph before the old one fades. It reminds me of those things that passed, but quickly died away." And I sang it to him with his eyes closed, and he was just playing this, what you hear on the record. And I said, how's it been? He said, "I've been okay." And I said, "What's wrong?" And he said, "August was a really heavy month." And so it just was a great expression, so I called it August Was a Heavy Month.
Now, when I was young, this song is somewhat autobiographical.
Well, the whole first part, "Live Fast, be a spark and glow a while," that was written a week after Mark Bolan died from T-Rex. And our first ever TV show in Britain, or anywhere, was the Mark Bolan show. He was coming back from being a junkie, and he was doing very well, and he gave us our first sort of break on TV, and 2 weeks later he died. And so I wrote that part for him: "Live fast, be a spark and glow a while, you'll be dead a long time, be a shooting star, and in one mad moment burning bright, light the night and make us stand in awe." And I knew that at the end I would go, "Drown." So when I was young was me thinking about that, I suppose. That came now, this year. And then I would dream 1,000 things, I'd read all that student stuff, read it till I'd had enough, then making up my own mind. Think it, feel it. I believed I'd never die when I was young. And so that's now. And the other bit was but also true. And you should anyway. You should be a spark and glow for a little while.
One of the things that occurred to me is you had this kind of spirit, and the other people, like the schoolmasters and even your dad at that point, said, "We got to stop this."
Um,
They were trying to beat that spirit out of
yeah,
you
they
in a
were. I mean,
sense.
but that's the point about the English, and I'm Irish, but it follows on the Irish school system is that it is uniform. You know, you wear uniforms. It is regimented. And indeed, I could never stand sports because they were team orientated. And so when I was at school, I did my best to irritate them. They confused that with me trying to be, I'm sure American parents say it to kids as well, they're not laughing at you, they're not laughing with you, they're laughing at you, that sort of stuff, you're always making a fool of yourself, you're the one who's been laughed at, they made a mistake. I was trying to distract myself, not them. I was so bored. And so I started when I was 14, I was very interested in politics and things. I started the campaign for nuclear disarmament in Dublin. And I joined anti-apartheid when I was 14. And music. Music because, well, first I got into music because my sister was, but secondly because I had big lips and floppy hair, and suddenly Mick Jagger came along, and all the girls thought it was hip to look like me after years of calling me liver lips, and so suddenly I was cool, Actually, I don't think I've ever been cool. I'm the most unhip person on the planet. But so this guy gave me his guitar, but he wouldn't let me. I'm left-handed. He wouldn't let me string it the other way around. So I learned it upside down, and that's the way I still play it. And I'd go into the school assembly hall and play by myself, pretending I was Pete Townsend. And I get caught and I get beaten for doing that. But they were the two interests. I mean, I hated being a teenager. I found it the most depressing and boring period of my entire life. And this myth that's around what great fun it is to be a teenager. I just remember waking up at 2 in the afternoon on the long summers holidays, and the torpor and lassitude and all the stuff that goes with that. Those were the two sort of interests in my life, and I suppose that it was a necessary breeding ground for what happened later.
It is crazy that all this stuff that went on that was kind of bad experience at the time was very bad, prepared you for a lot of things that happened later.
Well, nothing could be worse, so everything had to be better. I ran out those school gates, and I never returned until last year when they were doing a documentary on me, and they wanted me to go back to the school, and I went 20 yards inside the gate, and then I couldn't go any further. They've now renamed the school library after me, which is bizarre. And I went back.
So you did a lot of work there, right?
Yeah, right, And it was very funny, and like I said in the book, I couldn't recognize the ghost of that sad boy 18 years ago. I couldn't recognize it at all. But I still thought it was a horrible place.
Do you intend to get on the road to tour?
Yeah, I mean, if this thing's a hit, which it better be, then I will start touring February in Britain and Ireland, and then come here straight after St. Patrick's Day, around the middle of March, and see what happens. I am dying to play live again. It's my favourite thing to do, so I'm really looking forward to it.